Betty White, the beloved TV pioneer, showed us that humor can outlast any era. Tupac Shakur, whose words still echo, reminded the world that raw truth never dies. Norm Macdonald, the deadpan sage, proved that wit can cut through any crowd. Coolio, the rap legend, turned a simple beat into a cultural anthem that still reverberates. Leslie Jordan, with his flamboyant charm, reminded us that authentic laughter endures beyond the spotlight. Amy Winehouse, the soulful voice, left a haunting reminder that passion can both lift and shatter. The story of Donald J. Trump begins in the bustling streets of Queens, where a young boy learned the language of ambition from his father, Fred Trump, a prolific New York real estate developer. Fred's relentless drive to build middle-class housing for returning veterans after World War II was the first lesson in turning concrete into capital. In the evenings, Fred would take his son to construction sites, pointing out the margins between profit and loss, teaching that a deal was a battlefield where confidence could win more than bricks. Mary Ann, his mother, offered a contrasting softness, insisting that a gentleman's reputation mattered as much as his ledger. From these two forces, Donald inherited a paradoxical blend of hard-nosed pragmatism and a flair for spectacle. When the elder Trump died in 1999, Donald inherited not just a portfolio, but a reputation for daring risk. The 1970s had seen him expand the family's portfolio into Manhattan, where he launched the iconic Trump Tower. The tower's mirrored facade was more than a design choice. It was a metaphor for a man who wanted to reflect the city's aspirations while shielding his inner vulnerabilities. The tower's opening party, a flamboyant display of celebrity and power, introduced Donald to a new cadre of allies, media magnates, socialites, and a legion of lobbyists who saw in him a partner for their own visibility. Yet the real estate empire soon met its first major test. The early 1990s recession hammered the cash flow of his Atlantic City casinos, and the Trump Taj Mahal, once billed as the eighth wonder of the world, teetered on the brink of collapse. It was at this crossroads that Donald turned to a mentor outside his family circle. Roy Cohn, the notorious lawyer who had once defended Senator Joseph McCarthy. Cohn's advice was ruthless. Never admit defeat. Double down on the narrative you control. Under Cohn's counsel, Trump restructured his debts, used the bankruptcy courts as a strategic tool, and emerged with a reputation for resilience that would later become his political brand. The next pivotal relationship was with the emerging world of television. In 2004, a network executive approached him with a concept, a reality series that would pit aspiring entrepreneurs against his exacting standards. The Apprentice premiered in 2005, and each episode ended with the iconic line, "You're fired." The show turned a business mogul into a household name, broadcasting his brand of blunt, decisive leadership into millions of living rooms. The producers, the writers, and the camera crews became inadvertent collaborators, shaping a public persona that blurred the line between genuine authority and performative charisma. Trump's growing fame caught the eye of political operatives, who saw in his brand a vehicle for a new kind of populist insurgency. In 2015, after years of flirtations with the Republican establishment, he announced his candidacy for the presidency. The announcement was not a quiet speech in a convention hall. It was a rally at Trump Tower, broadcast live, where he declared, "We're going to make America great again." The rally introduced a new circle of allies, campaign strategists like Paul Manafort, media provocateurs such as Sean Hannity, and a social media base that thrived on unfiltered, often incendiary messaging. The primary battles were fierce. He clashed with establishment figures, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and even former President George H.W. Bush, who dismissed his lack of political experience as a liability. Yet each rebuke only amplified his narrative of being the outsider the system feared. The general election against Hillary Clinton turned into a referendum on the establishment versus the insurgent, and the televised debates became a stage for his combative style. The night of November 8, 2016, when the electoral map lit up with unexpected victories in the Rust Belt, was the culmination of a relationship chain that began with a father's construction site and ended in the Oval Office. Presidential power introduced a new set of relationships, chief among them the nation's security and intelligence apparatus. The appointment of Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor, the subsequent dismissal of James Comey, and the impeachment trials over the Ukraine call revealed a pattern. When confronted with institutional pushback, Trump leaned on loyalists who shared his disdain for what they perceived as bureaucratic overreach. The impeachment hearings in 2019 and 2021, though resulting in acquittal, cemented a legacy of constant confrontation with the legislative branch, a dynamic that continues to shape his political capital. Even as his term ended, the relationship with the media remained paradoxical. Every tweet, every press conference was a calculated duel with journalists who accused him of spreading misinformation. Yet those very confrontations kept him in the public eye, turning criticism into a form of free advertising. The post-presidential years saw him pivot to the world of social media platforms, where his unfiltered commentary attracted millions of followers and solidified a base that would later rally behind his attempts to influence the 2024 election cycle. Family ties also played a crucial role in his ongoing narrative. His children, Donald Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, served as both business partners and political confidants. Ivanka's evolution from a fashion entrepreneur to a senior advisor in the White House illustrated a familial strategy of embedding the Trump brand into policy. Meanwhile, Donald Jr. and Eric managed the Trump Organization's overseas ventures, navigating legal battles that tested the limits of corporate governance. Critics, from investigative journalists to former allies, have chronicled a series of legal entanglements. The Manhattan District Attorney's civil fraud trial, the New York Attorney General's investigations into the Trump Organization's financial practices, and the lingering questions surrounding the January 6th Capitol riot. These challenges have not diminished his influence. Instead, they have reinforced a narrative of a man who refuses to be silenced, a narrative that resonates with supporters who view him as a bulwark against a perceived deep state. Today, Donald Trump stands at the intersection of business, media, and politics, a living illustration of how personal ambition can be amplified by strategic relationships. His brand continues to dominate headlines, from courtroom verdicts to campaign rallies, and his influence on the Republican Party remains unmistakable. Whether as a former president, a media mogul, or a real estate tycoon, his story is still being written, echoing the same relentless drive that once echoed through the construction sites of Queens. In the broader tapestry of American leadership, Trump's saga is a study in how personal branding, relentless self-promotion, and a willingness to confront every institutional check can reshape a nation's political landscape. As the next election cycle looms, the world watches to see whether his narrative will evolve from insurgent to establishment, or whether he will remain the perpetual outsider who redefines the rules of power with each new chapter. The legacy of Donald Trump, therefore, is not measured solely by policies or buildings, but by the way he has turned the very act of storytelling into a weapon of influence, one that continues to reverberate across the halls of power, the screens of households, and the streets of cities that still bear the imprint of his name.